Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of Éire's Epics and History. I'm your host, John Fisher. Today's episode is going to be grim. It's going to be a grim one because we're going to be talking about the potato famine. So, just wanted to give you a heads up and warning in case you're not in the mood to hear some macabre details. But this is an important event in Irish history. It has a significant impact on the later half of the 19th century as well as the 20th century. So we're going to dive right in because we have a lot of ground to cover. A little context about the potato. It was introduced at the end of the 16th century in Ireland, and it became a main staple in Irish households due to the fact that it was well suited to the climate. The weather and climate in Ireland helped produce a very high yield of the crop. And around 1845, we start to see a fungus, form of water mold appear on it. This water mold is known to affect potato and tomato crops, creating blights. And basically, the name for it is, it's very hard to pronounce, but Phytophthora infestans. That was one pronunciation I heard. So, and no, I'm not going to say that again. Sorry, it was just that hard to pronounce. But yeah, basically, what happened was in 1845, this comes about. It was previously seen in the US and Canada. The first year, half the potato crop fails as a result, and the following year, the entire crop throughout the country has failed. And this puts the Irish in such poor conditions and disarray because many of them depend on the potato to grow and to sell as well. So it affects their livelihood as well as their ability to provide for their families since it was a main staple. But basically, some of the ways it affects the Irish is you have the workhouses, which are already overwhelmed with people. Now, with this famine upon them, they have to turn away many people. For those of you who don't know, a workhouse was a place that the poorest of the poor would go to in Ireland and Great Britain. It's called a poorhouse in Scotland, but a workhouse in Ireland and England. And basically, so they were turning away people. You had these religious organizations like the Quakers, who were heavily praised by the Irish because they set up these soup kitchens that the Irish could use to get some form of nutrition, some form of food. Usually the soups were very watery, did not taste very well, but, it was something. There were Protestants who also set up soup kitchens, but many of them required the Catholics to convert to Protestantism and Anglicanism to basically be able to get soup. And those who did were branded as soupers, or those who had taken the soup. It was a stigma that lasted with them, even if they didn't convert to Anglicanism because of the famine. It still affected them. And another impact was immigration. Many people ended up immigrating to places like the US and Canada and places in Great Britain like Glasgow and Liverpool, where, these large number of Irish communities started up. So, in August of 1847, you have about 3 million people visiting the soup kitchens each day. And in that same year, 1847, 100,000 people alone emigrated from Ireland to Canada. And about 900,000 people were in the workhouses. And the vessels to the US and Canada were were just horrible. Many of them were not built to carry people. Some of them even sunk a few days after leaving ports and harbors. and they were unseaworthy. The conditions were unhygienic and horrible. The people lived below deck, and many people died on the perilous journey to North America because of starvation and also because of disease, and the fact that so many people died on these ships and became infected with disease like scurvy. um this actually made a lot of ships well known for the number of deaths that occurred on them, instead of their sailing feats. And many of these ships became known as coffin ships, or and they basically he just again many of them, like, despite the poor conditions, many people were desperate to leave Ireland. They were desperate because of the famine, and so you had many merchants, many sailing merchants and sea navigators taking advantage of this, trying to make a profit off of these people suffering and their desire to leave the country. So that happened. Now, the famine, it lasted from 1845 to 1849, but it had a significant impact on the populations of Ireland because from up until 1840, Ireland had been experiencing a huge increase in population. In fact, actually, by 1845, some accounts say that there were about 9 million people in the country. Because of the famine, by 1900, 4 million people had left. As a result of the famine, and some factors beforehand, between 1841 and 1851, a county in the north of Ireland known as Fermanagh, 26 it lost 26% of its population, and half of them emigrated to other countries, while the other half died from the famine, from starvation and disease. And it really just goes to show that this famine affected the entire island of Ireland, not just the Republic, but the entire island. You had, like, Cavan, for instance, lost about 29% of its population. Uh, and you also, and there were a couple of contributing factors. One is that other European countries around this time have found on their land significant amounts of iron and coal that help to lead them into the Industrial Revolution. And this leads to the growth of cities and the emergence of these manufacturing industries. Ireland didn't have a significant amount of these resources. And that reminds me, a lot of the ships that brought people over from Ireland were short on provisions. So they didn't have, like, a lot of food to feed to these people, and they didn't also have a lot of medicines to help anybody who was sick. But basically, going back, so Ireland didn't have a lot of coal and iron, so the Industrial Revolution never really came to Ireland, at least not at that time. And so basically, as a result, the majority of the people lived off the land in these small rented cottages and these small rented homes, and many of them, their landlords did not care about them. The landlords were often absent, and they didn't care about the living conditions. All they were concerned about was getting rent, and the rent that they collected, very little of it went back into the Irish economy. Very little of it went even towards their own estates, which were heavily mortgaged. So, I mean, that's just a couple of things about this famine. The effects, like I said, were felt throughout the second half of the 19th century, as well as the later, as well as throughout the 20th century as well. And basically, is there anything else I can tell you about the famine? Well, I can tell you this. Today, the population of Ireland is a little over, and when I say Ireland, I mean the Republic in Northern Ireland. It's a little bit over about 6 million, so between 6 million and 7 million people. But at one point, there was probably close to 9 million people. So, even still today, the effects of the famine, while small, are still felt throughout Ireland based on that sheer fact. And that'll be it for this episode of Éire's Epics in History. I hope it was very informative. This is a topic I've been wanting to cover for a while. Please share this. I hope, that you enjoyed this video. Well, it's not really an enjoyable subject, I know, but you know what I mean. Yes, I thank you so much for following me, and thank you so much if you like the videos I've been making and sharing them. Please share this one. Again, it's a very important historical point in Irish history. Over the next few days, because March is coming to an end, I'm going to be skipping ahead of a good chunk of years because we got to get up to the present day, and I'm going to be trying to focus on the core events. So not exactly sure what tomorrow's video is going to be, but it will be a major core event, I can assure you. And yeah, that's it, like I said, for this episode. Have a good one.